Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Kazenza, and I'm joined by John Sheeran. And I say another episode of the Orange and Black Insider, but it's not like many other episodes because this episode is jam-packed with a lot of news, analysis, and of course, a 5-round mock draft from each one of us. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the schedule. We're going to try and get to some listener questions. The OBI line's already been blowing up before the show even started. So we're going to try and get to some of the stuff that came through there. Jam-packed show, John. Are you ready?
It's a nice hat you're wearing over there. The YouTube crowd.
Yeah. So some of you may remember a few months ago that the fine folks at New Era sent a pretty neat hat over my way, and Alex P over there. And randomly, I got a package in the mail, and my wife was like, "Hey, this is for you." I thought it was yet another Amazon purchase from the wife, and I was like, "Well, okay." I didn't realize what it was, and lo and behold, there was a 2019 Bengals draft hat from New Era, just randomly sent my way, not requested. They just decided to send it our way, and the mock draft tonight is going to be brought to you by New Era hats. So very comfortable hat. It's a little different from some of the other ones I own in the fact that it's kind of the lower bridge, not the high bridge type of hat, but it is. I got a little hat hair here, but it is a fitted one. It's got the 100 NFL logo on the back, so pretty cool hat. And I really enjoy it, and it's very, very nice of them to do that and to sponsor our mock draft tonight. So thanks to New Era Hats, and I'll be wearing this definitely through this episode, and then through all of our draft weekend coverage next weekend. I'll be sporting this hat. Go get yours either on newera.com, or if they sell them in local Cincinnati stores, I would assume they do. Go grab one. It's comfortable. I like it. They make good products. John, should we take a collective deep breath? I mean, this is going to be a jam-packed show, man. And this actually took this has been taking a little bit of planning throughout the week to try and get to do this. Thankfully, we're at kind of our normal time. There was no schedule snafus in terms of our live recording. The schedule snafus are always on my part, by the way. So we appreciate all of those who are joining us live. And, of course, John, I appreciate, as I mentioned last week, you being flexible with your schedule as well. So we've got a lot on tap, and we're gonna kick it off here in just a minute. In case you are new to the program, you could join us live every episode on cincyjungle.com, as well as our YouTube channel for the live recordings. You can, if you are able to join us, then you can get the show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on Google Play, on the Megaphone platform, and then, of course, like I said, Cincy Jungle and YouTube. So subscribe to our channels. Get all the content. There's going to be a lot of content coming up over the next calendar week here between this show and all of the draft stuff next week. So check that out, and we'll get you as much stuff as possible, and hopefully you enjoy it all. John, we already knew who the Cincinnati Bengals were going to face in terms of opponents in 2019. We didn't know the order. We didn't know all of that stuff. Well, that's changed because just before the kickoff of this show, the schedule was released. There were, little rumors here and there that we got throughout the day on Wednesday, but we now know what the Bengals 2019 schedule will look like. And I don't have that up on for the live listeners here, but I'm going to try and bring up a graphic of the schedule for people who watch after the fact. But in case you haven't heard, let's do just a quick, I'm going to rattle through these here. Week 1 at Seattle Seahawks. That's a very interesting one to start the season. Then they host the San Francisco 49ers for their home opener in week 2 at Buffalo Bills. It seems like that game is on the schedule in some form or another every single year. Then week 4, they finish the week of September on Monday Night Football, their only primetime game of the season. Week 5, they host the Arizona Cardinals, and then at the Baltimore Ravens. Then they host the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then there's that freaking game in London. Sorry to all of our UK listeners. against the Rams because I wanted to go to that game. But should be fun for those folks there and or people going to make that trek. Then right in the middle of their schedule, week 9 is their bye week. Week 10, they host the Baltimore Ravens. Week 11 at Oakland against the Raiders. Then they close out the series in week 12 at home against the Steelers. Then they host the Jets. And then the final month is very interesting and makes for a somewhat daunting stretch. They are at Cleveland in week 14. They host the Patriots in week 15. They are at Miami in week 16. And then they close the season with the Browns in week 17. Your initial thoughts on this schedule? And I saw some things on Twitter briefly. My day was so crazy today, I couldn't keep up with a ton of stuff. But I saw some things, some comments you made on Twitter about, hey, this is, I think you had mentioned this is kind of the layout that works well for them, all that kind of stuff. Your initial thoughts as you see how the schedule played out for the Cincinnati Bengals?
So I think similar to last year, they don't get a lot of home games out in front. They only get one in September, and that's against the 49ers. Then they return home against the Arizona Kyler Murrays early October. And then
you didn't say calamari, you said Kyler Murray.
Kyler Murrays. I don't know if Kyler Murray likes Kyler Murray, but the Kyler Murrays of the Cliff Kingsbury team. But yeah, the London game being in week 8, which means a week 9 bye, works out well for them. I don't know why you're so bitter about it. If you're gonna drive to LA, you might as well just fly to London. It takes the same amount of time.
Touche.
Yeah, I had to get off. Had to get one off though.
Like
but and then I think 4 division games after the week 9 bye. But at least 3 of them are at home. So it's kind of balanced in that sense, where you have daunting matchups in the back half, and also you play more playoff teams from last year in the first half of the schedule. But this is the 3rd place schedule, and there's some cupcakes on here. The Jets being one at the Raiders, presumably one of the last times they play in Oakland, if not that stadium doesn't get delayed again in Las Vegas. But starting out in Seattle will always be tough. I think Jay Morrison tweeted they're like an amazing record when they start at home, at least in their franchise history, especially in the stadium that they play in now. But should be playing a lot of young quarterbacks. They're playing Josh Allen for the first time. They're playing Jimmy Garoppolo for the first time week 2 at home. Playing Sam Darnold for the first time, and playing the Browns twice in December. That can go one of both ways. We're going to find out really soon if the Browns are for real, because I think they have 3 primetime games in the first 5 weeks, which is insane when you think about the Browns. But we're going to find out if they're for real and if they're contending for the playoffs, or if they fell off a cliff like some of our viewers may think they will. So that could either be 2 cupcakes, or that could either be 2 losses smacked outside of probably a likely loss against the New England in late December.
Yeah, tough. There's stretches of it that are tough, in my opinion. There are stretches of it that seem to be a little daunting, and right. That December stretch is very daunting, especially if Cleveland ends up being the team that people think that they will be. There are some people who are very optimistic, and as you look through the comments on Cincy Jungle, we posted a post on that showing the schedule. I mean, people aren't overly optimistic, and earlier in the day when there were rumors, there were people saying this is 6 or 7 wins and blah, blah, blah. It's one of those things as you look at it, of course, you don't know how everybody's going to be. The teams on the West are going to be, I mean, aside from obviously the divisional games, the teams on the West, both NFC and AFC, are going to be critical to this schedule because, I mean, yeah, they comprise most of it, but Seattle made the postseason last year. San Francisco, a lot of people thought they would if Garoppolo did not go down. Arizona, you mentioned they have the number 1 overall pick, and they were pretty terrible as a team. But if they get Kyler Murray, which almost everybody thinks they are going to, and he injects a lot of life into that franchise all of a sudden. We all know the Bengals have had trouble with mobile quarterbacks over the years, regardless of who their head coach is. So that could be a daunting game. Of course, the Rams made the Super Bowl, and it's in a neutral field that's far away. So that's a tough game. And then you've got the Raiders, who could be improved, probably still not a great team, though. So those are some difficult games to gauge. And as obviously every year you sit here and you say, oh, they're going to be good. This team's going to be good. That team's going to be terrible. And then things get flipped on their head. People thought the Bengals wouldn't be very good last year. That ended up being the case, but they shot off to a 4-1 start. And, all of a sudden people are like, wow, what's this team about? So we've seen things flip on their heads. These are, but some of those games are critical. And I think especially when you have Seattle, San Francisco, Buffalo, and Pittsburgh comprising, and then Arizona really comprising just over the first month of your schedule. If the Bengals are going to make any sort of run at a postseason berth, I think you got to get 3 wins out of those first 5 games. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's fair. And
especially just how December plays out with 2 games against the Browns, the Patriots, and they're sandwiched around the Patriots, and a trip to Miami, which has always been a tricky game for the Bengals.
Oh yeah, like you look at the Miami game and you're thinking it's sandwiched between the Browns and Patriots, and you're thinking, okay, that's 3 very tough games in itself, and the Dolphins are like projected to tank, but the Dolphins are always pesky for the Bengals, and some of the Bills too, and some of the Bills in some cases, and like they haven't proven anything with Josh Allen, and they still have a long way to go, but like that's it in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the schedule that presents itself to be the lightest game in itself, but it's still not going to be very, very easy, and it's also on the road. And the Steelers primetime game Monday night, we don't know how this team is going to come out of the gates under the lights for the first time without Marvin Lewis, and whether it's going to be any different or any marginal improvement under Zach Taylor. And you think of the Steelers right now and how they're going to evolve as an offense without Antonio Brown, without Le'Veon Bell, but with Ben Roethlisberger still there, 1 year older, and how those pieces are going to kind of gel. So that's going to be an incredible statement game for them, because they're probably not going to start off undefeated, because they're going at Seattle and they're playing 2 competitive teams in their mind, in the 49ers and Bills. So that could set the landscape for how that division is going to play out towards the heart of the season. And then once you get past that, again, Cardinals could be exciting with Kyler Murray. The Ravens are the defending champs, so they have to be respected. The Jags could easily rebound with an upgraded quarterback, and the Rams are the Rams. But at the very least, the one positive I'm getting from here is that, they're going to London, and they're going to have to travel across the pond for that. But that's a road game where they could have been playing at Los Angeles. They're only going out west 2 times compared to maybe 3 or 4. Only at Seattle, only at Oakland. They're bringing San Francisco here. They're bringing Arizona here. So not a ton of traveling compared to, I would assume, other teams. So yeah, that first half has some contenders on there potentially. But again, this is before the draft, and this is before we really know if these teams are going to be actually competitive or not.
You touched on it a little bit, John, the Steelers game, it being a Monday Night Football game. I think, like you said, that's going to take on maybe a little bit different complexion now that Marvin Lewis, Vontaze Burfict, Le'Veon Bell.
With that, yeah.
Yeah. Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, all those characters will not be in that game. So this could be a very different looking game. Aside from that, though, there's no Thursday night game, which has been a Bengals staple, especially early in the season. That's been a Bengals staple. There are no Sunday night games, which Cincinnati just is awful.
We need a break.
Yeah. What do you, I mean, the cynical fan sits here and you say, oh, thank God there's only one game, and even one primetime game is too many, especially against the Steelers. Or are you saying, hey, it's a bummer? There are some exciting players on this team. This isn't a team that's got a new coach, an upstart team. I don't know if you have a Facebook profile, John. If so, we should be friends, buddy. But I saw on the NFL Facebook feed, there was a video of some of their pundits saying, who were some unexpected teams to make the postseason. And the Bills and the Bengals were 2 teams that were mentioned. So, I mean, this could be a team that could be an upstart team under Zach Taylor. A lot of people seem to be impressed with him. But, I mean, I guess what I'm saying, this is a really long-winded way of just kind of asking you your impressions of the fact that the Bengals only have one primetime game this year. Good thing, bad thing, or are you just kind of like, well, it is what it is. They're coming off of 3 losing seasons.
The season was only 5 months ago or 4 months ago, but I'm having trouble forgetting. I'm pretty sure they only had scheduled one last year, and then they got flexed to one
Right.
week 6 against Kansas City. We all saw how that turned out. So I think it's good for them to just kind of get their feet under them and just to kind of see where they are under a new head coach, under an entirely new coaching staff, to see how everything gels. And if they start strong like last year, I'm sure that the NFL will take advantage of potential ratings and maybe flex like that Baltimore game to a primetime game, maybe flex that Jacksonville game to a primetime game, depending on how well those teams are doing at that moment. But that Steelers primetime Monday Night Football game is going to be a great litmus test to see if things have really changed and if they're really ready to compete early on in the season. And I don't know if we should expect them to, just as much as I don't think we should expect them not to, because there is talent. There is still a decent nucleus of talent on this team, and you would like to think that a new head coach, a new coaching staff can kind of rejuvenate some of that talent, rekindle some of the talent that's still on here that might have been dormant for the past couple of years. But it's going to be interesting to see if anything has changed, and if it has, then I'm sure they'll get rewarded with a primetime game down the stretch, because there could be potentially intriguing games on the schedule. But at the same time, like, I'm fine with no Thursday night games. That's one way ticket to getting injured late in the season. And like even still, like on the surface level, there's not tremendously interesting games without knowing if these teams are good or not. But if they earned it, then they'll earn it, and then we'll see if they're really ready for it.
You going to any games? You going to go to any in? Probably, I would assume, in Cincinnati. But
so the last game I went to was the Thursday nighter against the Dolphins in 2016.
Oh, that's a good one to go to.
I haven't been back in 2 years, and that was mainly out of protest of the Marvin Lewis era. But maybe now the times have changed, so I might find myself down there. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm actually. I think I'm gonna go to. So if anybody that listens to this podcast of the Bengals contingent, I think I might go to the Seattle game. We have some friends that live up there, and actually one of which was some of the friends that were out. If you listened to last week's episode, I was in Las Vegas, and there were some friends of ours that were in Las Vegas. That's why we made the trip out there. So they live out kind of in the Seattle-ish area. We have another set of friends that live out there. My brother and his son want to go. So we're talking about going. We didn't think it would be week 1. We thought it was maybe going to be like week 2 or week 3 or something like that. But we might do that one. So if anyone's, if you follow me on Twitter or anything like that, I'll let you know if I end up going. But that's one I might go to. I mean, Oakland is obviously an easy trip from where I am, but I've been to an Oakland game before. Those aren't fun, man. That is not a fun venue to go see an opposing team at. So I don't know. Those are probably the couple. I don't think I'm going to make it out to Cincinnati this year. Unfortunately, I did go to the home opener in 2016. So I was there probably just a week before you were at a game that year against the Broncos. Yeah. So but interesting. You are going to put up a post on cincyjungle.com that is going to be a prediction, early predictions. Obviously, I think this is going up probably before the NFL draft picks are going to be in. I think it's kind of a reaction piece to the schedule, but do you have, I don't want to, spoil that post, but I mean, do you have some thoughts and or predictions that you want to share with us on the air before that post goes live on the site?
So I literally ran through the schedule in like 2 minutes and just jotted down a W or an L next to each game and didn't really think about it much. And it's similar to last year in a good and a bad way, I guess. So,
okay,
check it out.
Okay, yeah. So good. Check out John Sheeran's schedule prediction and reaction piece. Maybe we'll add this media to it, John. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah. I mean, I think cautious optimism is something to be. there's something to be said about being in that camp right now. I think as you look at it, to me, this potentially smells like Marvin Lewis's first year, where maybe it's a slow start or they kind of get some things going and they're in the playoff hunt towards the end of the year. Maybe they drop the ball at the end of the year and they don't end up making it. But this seems like it could be an 8 or 9 win type of scenario. And that's, again, just kind of looking at this basically since it came out 30 minutes before this show. But very conservatively speaking, I mean, I can see it being an 8-8, maybe 9-7, and then going maybe even one game the other way. So 7 to 9 win range, I think, is kind of what I'm looking at this point. But the Cincinnati Bengals schedule is out. Again, week 1 Seahawks, at Seahawks, week 2 home for 49ers, week 3 at Bills, week 4 at Pittsburgh on Monday Night Football, week 5 host the Cardinals, week 6 host the Ravens, week 6 at Baltimore, week 7 host the Jaguars, week 8 in London against the Rams, week 9 is the bye, week 10 host the Ravens, week 11 at the Raiders, week 12 host the Steelers, week 13 host the Jets, week 14 at Cleveland, week 15 host the Patriots, week 16 at Miami, week 17 to end the season they host the Browns, and maybe that game will mean something. We'll see. But it'd be nice, and obviously that would be the NFL's goal, is to have those games at the end of the season mean something. So, and keep your eye out for John Sheeran's, as I mentioned, his schedule reaction and predictions piece that's going up on CincyJungle.com. Speaking of CincyJungle.com, that is one of the places you can get this program along as well as on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, Megaphone, and our YouTube channel. So we appreciate however you get the show. Try and join us live on YouTube and Cincy Jungle if you're able. Otherwise, get the show on those platforms how you can after the fact. We appreciate all of the support. Well, it's time, John. It's time to unleash the beast, as they say. And by the way, I guess we should backtrack a little bit. We're going to open up the phone lines late in the show if we have time. So you can give us a call after our mock drafts are finished at 949-542-6241. You can shoot us a text during and tell us how big of idiots we are and how much you hate our picks, because that is bound to be the case with mock drafts. So you can hit us up there, or you can leave your comments in the live YouTube chat or the comment thread at CincyJungle.com. And we'll try and get to those comments as well as some questions at the end of the show as we finish up our mock drafts. But it is time for us to unveil our mock drafts. Now, unfortunately, we just don't have the time to do a 7-round mock draft, and the fact that the Bengals have like 28 6th-round picks, that just that would take forever. So John, I've already got mine set up. I'm sure you do as well. I did not include any trades. There was one scenario where I was thinking about it, but I didn't do it.
This is awkward. I traded up to the first overall pick with mine.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nah, I got 5 picks.
Okay. All right. That's what I have too. So they're just kind of a spoiler alert. There were no trades in mine. Sounds like there's no trades in yours. What we're going to do this a little different. We're going to kind of keep the listeners in suspense as we go. So we're going to start in round 5 and work our way up. The Bengals have a pick in each one of those rounds. We are going to start with the lower picks and work our way up. Before we start unveiling our picks, John, I want to ask you this, because let's preface this mock draft with, there's a formula that we're using here. The formula is what we think the Bengals are going to do, the impressions the Bengals are giving us in terms of what they might do, as well as some of our favorite players in this draft in terms of their potential fit and need for the Cincinnati Bengals, and kind of playing into, the impressions that the Bengals are giving us, I guess, what we think we know going into this draft. So if you have some quick bullet points that would maybe help explain why you went the route you're going to tell us you went throughout this mock draft, in terms of maybe some things you think you know about the Bengals as they head into the draft next week?
So I think I know that 3 or at least 4, or let's say like 3 of the first 5 or 6 picks are going to be in the front 7 of the defense. Because I think despite Zach Taylor's arrival and him being an offensive coach, I think defense is probably going to be the majority of their first major draft picks of this draft to fix that unit that was ranked 31st expected points added. And along with the fact that their secondary is pretty stacked, and not stacked where it being the best in the NFL, but comparative to what their linebacking group is and what the depth on their defensive line is, it's porous in terms of the front 7. So I think they've shown in guys that they brought in for meetings that they're willing to attack that as early as possible if the right player is there, and if not, they've got contingency plans for other players to at multiple positions to kind of fill out that position group. And at the start of the whole process, before they signed Bobby Hart, there was the impression that they were looking at offensive tackles early. Then they signed Bobby Hart and I guess backed into a deal in case they ended up not being able to draft the guy in the first round to just get him on the books. But then as time has progressed into a week before the draft, now they've started to show interest in the best offensive tackles in this class, sans Jonah Williams. So I think offensive tackles still on the radar within the first 2 or 3 rounds. So a lot of trench interest on the offensive and defensive line, and as well as linebackers. They've obviously shown interest in the best 2 Devins, Devin Bush and Devin White. And yeah, I think those are their established 3 biggest areas of concern. And the only position that a lot of people care about is quarterback. And honestly, they've been extremely secretive about it. They've sat on their hands a lot in the process, and we don't know too much about what they're thinking about it. And maybe that's by design. Maybe they don't want to tip their hand into showing interest in these quarterbacks in case they don't want their first round plans to get messed up. But in any case, it's very much up in the air, and I might not be willing to address that position in this mock draft based off of their perceived lack of interest in that area.
Well said. And hard to disagree with pretty much anything you said there. Some of the things that I would put down in terms of things I think I know, or how I came to the conclusion of these picks that we're going to get to in just a second. I think that the Bengals think that they have solved many of their offensive line issues. And I think you touched on that with Bobby Hart. They signed, John Miller at the guard position. They re-signed Alex Redmond. They re-signed Trey Hopkins. I think the Bengals, now that doesn't mean they're not going to take an offensive lineman. Doesn't mean they're not going to take an offensive lineman with a higher pick. I just don't see them either reaching for one. I don't see them. I think that they think they've got things more or less figured out, or that they're comfortable with not necessarily needing to take an offensive lineman high. And I think that the interior offensive line group is very crowded. Christian Westerman's still there, along with all the other names I just mentioned. Clint Bowling's still there, who is probably their best offensive lineman at this point. So, I think that they figure stuff out there, and that played into my equation. My thing is if they don't take a quarterback at 11, I think they're going to wait until late in the draft for a developmental guy.
Yeah.
And let him duke it out. I don't think that they're going to tinker around with these mid-round guys. I think it's going to be either 11 or it's going to be someone late that they think that they can develop and be, compete with Jeff Driscoll as the backup. Then maybe they wait the next year or the year after for a quarterback. But I think it's one or the other there. I think character, we can laugh about Jim Turner and all that stuff. I do think character is going to play into this draft. I think Taylor wants to make a statement there. Those are some of the and the other thing I wanted to throw out is I don't know if this is still the mindset, but at least under Marvin Lewis and in recent drafts, the Bengals seem to really like guys from big schools. They don't do the small school aspect. They get the power programs. They get the guys who performed well against really stiff competition. So that kind of played into some of my picks.
And that's always been something that Duke Tobin said. And I believe it transcends more than just a Marvin Lewis mindset.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. That being said, my friend, do you want me to start or do you want to kick it off?
I'll kick it off.
Okay. Round 5.
Round 5.
Pick 149, I believe it is.
It's crazy. It's round 5 and everybody's on the board.
Yeah, that's right.
But I'm gonna go with maybe the pick that I'm least confident in, which makes sense because it's round 5.
Hold on 1 sec before you do it. I'm sorry, and we'll tee it up again, just so you know, and so everybody knows. There's going to be people that are going to say that guy's not going to be available in this round. Yes. That guy's not going to be available in that round. All that kind of stuff. First of all, we know. Second of all, we're not soothsayers, and we don't have a crystal ball in front of us. We're doing the best we can with our knowledge of players, what the Bengals want, all that kind of stuff. Third, and a point that I think a lot of people need to realize, every year people say that guy's never going to be there. That guy's never going to be there. Well, remember when everybody said the Bengals were going to draft Andrew Billings in the first round and he fell all the way to the 4th round? Do you remember when guys tumble for no reason on draft day? Sometimes it's a reason that comes out on draft day. Weird things happen. Guys are available. There are runs on certain position groups at certain times that cause other players to fall. George Aloka was a fifth round pick or 6th round pick. Marvin Jones, same deal. So if you want to criticize, fine, but let's at least play within those confines. Now that I said that, let me tee you up, John, with pick 5 or round 5, pick 149. Who do you have?
I'm gonna go with Dalen Mack, defensive lineman from Texas A&M. Texas A&M has connection with Jim Turner. He obviously has exposure to him as the offensive line coach, and he went against him a lot. Mack was a guy who I first noticed at the Senior Bowl along with his teammate in Kingsley Keke. Keke is more of the traditional 3-technique pass rusher, and Mack is actually a 330-pound nose tackle. And the Bengals, I think, have shown interest more in 3 techniques than they have in nose tackles. But just looking at what the roster is right now and where I think they may feel more comfortable than not at that position, they have Andrew Billings with 1 year left on his contract. And that's honestly an interesting debate to look at further into the offseason. Behind him, they don't really have much at the position. They re-signed Josh Tupou to an exclusive rights deal, but that essentially means he's a camp body. We don't know how much attachment he has to the current coaching staff there. And last year, they really tried to make Ryan Glasgow into a 3 technique. And in the weeks that he was healthy, he did show some promise and flash. I don't trust Glasgow long-term as a 3 technique option viable behind Geno Atkins. But right now, I think that's still his position there. And they obviously still have Geno. So looking at how the roster can be constructed and who's going to be active, I think that at least until I know that this isn't going to translate or transcend the Marvin Lewis era, they might be looking for that backup who also has versatility to go up against the guard. And I think that Mack has that because at 330 pounds, he's extremely athletic. He ran like a 5'1" 40 at the combine and showed very solid explosion numbers as well. So I think he has penetration ability similar to Billings, but I think he's better than Billings in terms of overall tackle radius and just getting hands on guys and finishing plays in the backfield. And that gives him an upside to kind of steal some snaps away from Billings as they may be prepared to move on from him after the season. So 5th round, I think they eventually do draft a defensive tackle sometime in this draft, and they've always been known to kind of focus on that position in the middle round. So Mack is kind of a value pick here in the 5th round. This is where he's projected according to draftscout.com. Good athlete, big school, connection to Jim Turner. I'm going to go with Dalen Mack.
Dalen Mack, defensive lineman from Texas A&M. I went round 5, pick 149, and I love this kid. One of my personal favorites in the draft. I went Bryce Love, the running back out of Stanford. Cincinnati potentially needs now. This may be a little bit of a luxury pick based on some needs on defense and all of that. Cincinnati needs another running back because Mark Walton was released, and it's a shame that they need to use another pick. But this is a guy, it's a position that they need. Giovanni Bernard has had a little bit of durability issues over the years. Joe Mixon missed a couple of games last year, and this is a change of pace guy. But this is a guy that was a Heisman candidate type of guy in 2017. He had an insane year. about 2,100 rushing yards, 20-some touchdowns at that point. 2018, he battled injury, so the numbers took a big dip. He is also known as an extremely high character guy from what I know of him. So I think he fits. I think his ceiling is a guy that is a rotational back in the NFL, a guy you could lean on for a couple of games for potential production from a starting back, but he needs to do a little bit better in catching the football. But he's a big play guy. He's a smaller guy, and his coach David Shaw at Stanford spoke so well of him. So I'm going to say Bryce Love is a pick that the Bengals could use at running back in round 5, pick 149. Zach Taylor gets a new toy to play with, so to speak, as he builds this offense.
All right. So my next pick, I actually changed it right before we started recording because it was originally a tight end. And throughout this entire process, tight end was a position that I've always thought that the Bengals would address kind of in this range because of what the position group is right now. It's a lot of uncertainty behind CJ Uzomah. Eifert's on a 1-year deal, and they have basically undrafted free agents filling out the rest of the roster. But I'm going to make a bold prediction right now. I think they draft a wide receiver before they draft a tight end in this class because of the interest that they've shown in a number of wide receivers. And the receiver I'm picking here is actually somebody who visited with the team today, Wednesday, the 17th, the last day for pre-draft visits, Terry McLaurin, wide receiver out of Ohio State. And I'm going to go with this pick because, one, I think he has the potential to be active on game days because he's a special teamer. He's a special team gamer. He's a gunner on punt teams. And for the OSU fans who listen to this podcast, who are also Bengals fans, they know what I'm talking about. He flies down the field on punts, and he loves doing it. And that was something that really stood out in the Senior Bowl, and that's 2 Senior Bowl guys that I've picked so far. But when he's on offense, he's a game breaker on those vertical routes. And why wasn't massively productive in OSU's offense, mainly because of the offense that they ran with Dwayne Haskins, a lot of mesh, a lot of underneath concepts, and that was mainly Paris Campbell's game. McLaurin's teammate, McLaurin didn't get a lot of downfield deep threat shots like a guy like Devin Smith did a handful of years ago, but that might have been a case of just underutilization. And I think in terms of just filling out that receiving group with a guy that can stretch the field, who can give them some snaps in case maybe John Ross goes down under injury to replace that niche role, who also has special teams versatility to be able to make the dress list every week because of that, and also provide some type of insurance because you have Tyler Boyd entering a contract year, AJ Green entering a contract year. I'm not saying he's going to develop into those caliber players down the line because he didn't have that production precedent to hit a high quality outcome. But on day 3, when you have an athletic guy like this who can do multiple things, I think that's something that the Bengals would value very much.
So Terry McLaurin, the Bengals have met. I think this week they met with both Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin.
Yeah.
So both OSU wideouts there. So there's definitely some interest on some level by the Bengals in the OSU wideouts there. This is the Orange and Black Insider 5-round mock draft. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. This mock draft is brought to you by New Era Caps. For those of you tuning in, you can see my lovely draft cap. So thank you to New Era for sponsoring this segment. And go get yourself a draft hat and wear it and sport it like I am going to next week for the NFL draft. And I'll be taking it off to wipe my sweaty brow because we'll be busy, man. We will be busy next week. There is no doubt. So you have for your first 2 picks, John, just real quick, you have say them again.
Dalen Mack
in round 5.
And Terry McLaurin.
Okay. I have Bryce Love, the running back out of Stanford, for round 5, pick 149. And I'm going to stay, and this is our boy, John. I'm going to stay in round 4, pick 110. I'm going to stay in the Pac-12. Chuma Edoga, the tackle from USC. I knew him when you mentioned him. And to be quite honest, I've watched more and more of him since you started bringing him up on this program. So I got to give a tip of the cap to you for talking about him. High upside guy. I think there's a lot of athleticism there. He did have some injury issues last year. He needs some developmental work, but he has potential to play either right tackle or left tackle at the next level. Probably needs a year or two to be, a truly effective starter. And I think at some point he can supplant Bobby Hart, probably after this initial year of Bobby Hart's new contract that he signed. I looked at it. There's some people that say, oh, he's not a great pass blocker, but he's a good run blocker. And then there's other people who say that it's the opposite. He's good against the pass, but not the run. And I looked at it and I saw games where it was one or the other, and he didn't really do both well at a lot of the same time in a lot of the same games. Now, some of that has to do with scheme, some of that has to do with the struggling Trojans team, all that kind of stuff. But I think that I think that if he is coached well and not in the laughable Jim Turner school of offensive line coaching that we have seen in the past, but if he is coached well, I think he has potential to be an effective starter, especially at right tackle for this team. He's got athleticism. He just needs work. He needs some coaching. And I think if he can have times where he can fully put together the run blocking and the pass protection in the same game or in long stretches, I think he's going to be a very good player. It's just, like I said, his tape is a lot of bits and pieces. It's like bits and pieces of good here and then kind of just So he needs a little more consistency for me. But round 4, pick 110, Chuma Edoga. So I have Bryce Love, the running back, and Chuma Edoga, the offensive tackle out of USC.
Yeah, if you're drafting a tackle in the 4th round, your best hope is he turns it into Anthony Collins. I think it's not the dimensions aren't exactly similar, but I think that's play style. It's a decent comp because Collins is probably more well known as a pass protector than a run blocker who came in pinches and just did his job well. And fortunately for him, he overperformed and got paid probably more than he should have. But if that's Edoga's career, then you'll definitely accept that for a 4th round pick. Yep. My 3rd round pick. So last year, my biggest fear was the Bengals taking Orlando Brown with around where they would pick right now in the 3rd round, because I didn't have a lot of confidence in Brown developing into a high quality starter.
He surprised people.
He surprised me a little bit because he played a lot better than my expectations were. I still don't think he's going to be where people say he is right now, but I'm going to make a pick that's kind of equal to that. Not an offensive tackle, but a player who's had a similar fall from grace in this pre-draft process, and that's Jacob Polite, the defensive end from Florida. Right now, that's the 3rd round is about the middle of where people see him. He might even be a day 3 pick because of just how tumultuous his pre-draft process was, but he might end up going in the 2nd round. So the 3rd round kind of fits in an intermediate spot with that, and also fits where the Bengals typically draft edge rushers. The 3rd round is like the sweet spot for them. And just looking at what they have at defensive end right now, they have 2 starters, presumed starters, in Dunlap, and the presumed starter would be Sam Hubbard, replacing Michael Johnson as that quote-unquote base defensive end. Then you have Carl Lawson as your nickel guy, replacing Hubbard, who, in fairness, is coming off a torn ACL, and we don't know how quickly he's going to return to that form. And even so, his 2nd year wasn't as promising as we thought. He didn't quite make the jump from that promising rookie year that he made. So overall, the defensive end group is not as promising, I think, as some people may make it out to believe it be, because I don't think that Hubbard is right now a dominant pass rusher. And even with 6 sacks to his name, I think that he still has a lot of work to do with that. And for what Polite should be expected to do, just provide a pass rushing spark. And I don't expect him at this point to develop into a high quality player, because he didn't test with the athleticism to do that. And honestly, there's probably more questions than answers with who he is as a person and what his effort is and what his character is and all that stuff. And that's why he's going to be available or probably around this juncture. But just coming as a 4th defensive end to kind of relieve Dunlap at either strong side defensive end or weak side defensive end in those nickel situations. And honestly, with the Bengals' experience with drafting Dunlap, who could have been a 1st round pick back in 2010, he had some incidents off the field with some questions with his effort and character. He ended up dropping to the 2nd round, and he's developed into a pretty good player in his own right. So Bengals have experience with a similar situation in that. And I think with what they need at defensive end and what the value is here, and they don't have to expect Polite to be a great player in the future because those expectations have kind of been thrown out the window at this point. So I think for what they need and what Polite is and what they can expect him to be, this kind of makes a lot of sense. And plus they met with him earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another connection that, in what we think we know. I mean, the Bengals do have connections to, they draft, or especially in the undrafted free agent arena, they usually draft, or bring in people that they have met with previously. So for me, this one may or may not be a popular one, but I have long said on this podcast over the past couple of months, I've said that this position is a sneaky need. You have already addressed it. I have not, but round 3, pick 72. This guy is either going to go way higher than everybody thinks, or he's going to go way lower than everybody thinks. And I went with Riley Ridley, the receiver out of Georgia. The Bengals, as we know, love Georgia players. Ridley could very well be a second-round player, but he's not his brother. His brother, Calvin Ridley, was far more explosive, and that's what propelled him into the late first round. This kid is just solid in everything he does, from skills to his size. His 40 it is a little bit on the poor side, which is maybe pushing him to the round 3 area. And that's if you look at John Ledyard's breakdown from the Draft Network of him, he has him as a 3rd-round player. The Bengals, look, there's been some very, very vague and unfounded rumors, trade rumors with A.J. Green. There was the weird trade rumor situation with John Ross. Tyler Boyd and A.J. Green are both in contract years. And then behind those 3, they have Alex Erickson, but he is more the special teams ace. There's just a lot of And I think that, and I debated on who to actually take. Round 3 for me was a wide receiver pick for me because, it's not an overly pressing need to me, but I do think that Taylor's going to want to collect some capable wide receivers like he had in LA. And they got a lot of those guys. Josh Reynolds, 3rd-round pick. Cooper Kupp, Josh Reynolds, 4th-round pick. Cooper Kupp, 3rd-round pick, right around the area that Riley Ridley, I have him being selected here. So, he's a very good route runner. He's got very good hands. He didn't run all that well. But like I said, Cincinnati loves those Georgia players. There's unclear futures of Green, Ross, and Boyd, and however you want to play that out. And then, he could be a good red zone guy. And if everything works out well at that position group, Green, Boyd, Ross, all those guys are here, and maybe even extend Green and Boyd going forward. The Rams used a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. So, that could be a thing that Ridley's maybe that 4 guy. Or if John Ross doesn't take the steps needed, he kind of becomes a 3 guy. So that's kind of my rationale on that one. So Riley Ridley was my 3rd-round pick for the Bengals.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement of the overall assessment of receivers, of what that means to Zach Taylor and what it means to what they have right now. Because I don't think anybody would be necessarily upset with fresh investment in receivers because of what is there at the moment. Josh Malone, Cody Cord don't really give you much. And there is a thought of a brand new set of eyes taking over and kickstarting their development. But when you come from an offense of the Rams and going to the Bengals, you have obviously elite talent up front with Green and Boyd, but behind them, as we've seen, if one or both of those guys go down, then there's just not a lot to pick up the pieces and help out Andy Dalton. So early investment in receiver is probably not the worst idea, and I'm glad we are in agreement with that. So moving on to the 2nd round, offensive tackle is been a big conundrum for me in terms of where the Bengals could address it, because I could see them going, avoiding it to the 4th round with a guy like Max Sharping, who's one of my personal favorites. I can see him dipping in the 3rd round, and I can also see him going into the 2nd or 1st round. But I think this is probably the sweet spot based off where I think they're going to go in the 1st round. And this is, I think, a good area because I think this player will come off the board right around here, and it's someone that they've also shown interest in earlier in the draft process. I don't think they brought him in for a private meeting, but they did meet him at his pro day. I do think he checks the boxes of what they're looking for, and it's Dalton Risner. Obviously, another Senior Bowl guy, another tenacious guy, probably fits what Jim Turner's looking for with his guys in their mentality. Solid size, like 6'4", 6'5", 315 pounds, 34-inch arms. Tested well to stay outside of tackle because he has enough speed and explosion to get out in space into his kick sets and pass protect. PFF loves him in terms of pass protection production, but he also has a road grader inside of him, and he can drive guys off the ball. So he can do basically anything that you want him to do, and that not only includes just pass protecting and run blocking as a tackle. He has positional versatility. At the Senior Bowl, he talked about he loved playing center, but he played mostly guard, or he played a pinch of guard at Kansas State, and he ended up finishing his career at right tackle. So I think for what the Bengals are probably looking for on offensive line, they're looking for a guy that can play multiple positions, because in terms of what they have right now, they have most of that group filled out, but they just need a guy that kind of round out the entire group and give them versatility and depth at multiple positions in case injuries occur. And I think for what the plan is right now, they have both Westerman, Hopkins, and Bowling entering free agency after 2019. And I guess Bobby Hart is basically playing on 3 one-year deals, essentially, or at least after 2019, he's probably he should be looking behind his back in case someone can come up and replace him. So I think right now for 2019, Risner would be just the swing tackle to be active on game days, but also be able to play inside in case something goes down there. And in the future, if they have an opening at guard, at left guard or right guard, I think that Risner could be expected to slide in there and maybe do like a reverse Whitworth and play guard, and then maybe further in his career move out to tackle. But I think he just fits what they are looking for in terms of just adding one more offensive lineman to the group.
That is actually a guy I contemplated putting in my spot for this round, but I did not. But very good. I think he's going to be a guy in the NFL where, regardless of where he goes, he's probably going to always be very good. I don't think he's going to ever be like a perennial Pro Bowl guy. I don't know that he will ever be the Andrew Whitworth level, but I think he's going to be a very good player for somebody. Like you said, I think the guard tackle thing is valuable, especially to a team like the Cincinnati Bengals. So good pick there, John. My second round pick, so I went from rounds 3, 4, and 5, I went offense. Guess what needs the most work based on last year? It's the defense. And with round 2, pick 42, I went with Mack Wilson, the linebacker out of Alabama. Guy needs a lot of work in terms of, well, I don't want to say he needs a lot of work, but he needs some work because there was a dip in production and a dip in play from 2017 to 2018. He seemed to play with great instincts in 2017. Not so much. He was a little bit more, I don't know what you want to call it, robotic, or just didn't really play with as much, raw instinct this last year as he did the year prior. But good player, good athleticism. He's not – maybe the pass defender that you may see from a Devin Bush or somebody like that. But I think I think he's capable. He is an inside linebacker, but I think the Cincinnati Bengals are going to do a lot of stuff to mix things up. And I think he's more versatile as a linebacker than a Preston Brown is. Preston Brown's kind of that real squatty, thumper middle linebacker. Mack Wilson does, thump, and he's got some meat on him, but I think he is a guy that you can move around. You can play him. You're more comfortable playing him in space than you are a Preston Brown. So, and the Bengals, I guess I'm going back to the previous regime, but the Bengals like to pick linebackers in round 2. They did it with Odell Thurman, and they did it with Ray Maualuga. So, they've done it before. That seems to be a round that they like to get a linebacker primarily from a big school. So I'm going to go Mack Wilson. Needs some work, but I think could end up being a very good football player for the defense at a position of need. You then flank Preston Brown in the middle. If you do the traditional 3-set, you have Nick Vigil, and then you play Mac Wilson maybe as your strong side to start off, and then he eventually supplants Preston Brown on the inside. But I think there's going to be some diversity in the scheme where you can move Wilson around and play to his strengths.
Yeah, I like that because I think I'm always hesitant of Alabama linebackers because they don't really produce, and Wilson's really no exception to that. But he's young, and he only played, I think, 3 years there, so he might have been more productive had he stayed and gotten a lot more tackles this senior year. But I do think, in comparison to a guy like Rashaan Evans and Reuben Foster came before him, I think he does play better in space, and he has more of an adapt sense and coverage, which will definitely help him stay on the field for third down. So there's talk about him like potentially sliding like further down the into the day 2 range, but I think if he's still there and the Bengals don't take a linebacker in the first round, he'll definitely be high on their list in terms of priority.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, maybe my 3rd and 2nd round picks. Maybe those will flip. Who knows? But I think it's a guy that should be up there in terms of needs. Before we get to our first round picks, John, do you mind just running through your rounds 2 through 5 in whichever order you would like, since we've already unveiled them? But if you want to just remind folks about that.
So counting down from 5, 4, 3, 2, we have Dalen Mack, the defensive tackle from Texas A&M, Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver from the Ohio State University, Ja'Kai Polite, defensive end from Florida in round 3, and round 2 was Dalton Risner, the offensive lineman from Kansas State.
Awesome. And I had round 5, Bryce Love, the running back out of Stanford. Round 4, Chuma Edoga, the offensive tackle out of USC. Round 3, Riley Ridley, the receiver out of Georgia. Round 2, Mac Wilson, linebacker out of Alabama. And before we unveil our first round picks, this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. We're having some fun doing a 5-round mock draft courtesy of New Era. And by the way, what a nice sponsor for the New Era. It's a new day, right? I mean, it plays into the whole deal with the Cincinnati Bengals in 2019. So thanks to New Era for sponsoring this segment. And you can get this show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on Google Play, on the Megaphone platform. It's also on cincyjungle.com and YouTube. So subscribe to our channels. Get to us how you can. We're going to try and get to some, maybe a couple of questions and reactions here where we're running a little long, but we'll try and get to those here in just a little bit. John, round 1, pick 11, my friend. Who you got? So,
spoiler, I'm not gonna ignore the linebacker needing to round 6. So this is going to be a linebacker. I think it's going to be a similar situation to last year because I think the Bengals showed a lot of interest in what many people regarded as the best linebacker or the best center in last year's class. He ended up taking right before him, and I think it's going to be a similar situation. They're going to take the second best player at their biggest position of need, a position that they haven't drafted in the first round in quite some time. Maybe not as long as center because they drafted Keith Rivers back in 2008, but I think linebacker is probably going to be the pick here. And I think it's not going to be Devin White because he's going to be off the board. I think it's going to be Devin Bush, the linebacker out of Michigan. I think for what they need in terms of replacing Vontaze Burfict, not only a guy who can play on the outside and run and chase and drop back into coverage and to be a playmaker for all 3 downs, but to be a catalyst, to be a leader, to be a spark on the defense. I think Bush has the capability to do that. He's turning 21 this summer. He's not even 21 right now. But in that Michigan defense, it's hard. It's hard to be productive when you're surrounded by a lot of NFL-ready talent. And he definitely was in Rashawn Gary, Chase Winovich, a couple defensive backs along with him. But in the time that he started, he still produced, and it's important for linebackers. And some would say that he has a more innate ability in coverage than a guy like Devin White does, and he plays maybe a little bit more under control, and maybe doesn't have the greatest dimensions that you want from a prototypical linebacker because he isn't 6 foot. He doesn't have 33, 34-inch arms, but when he hits you, he hits you, and that's a physical attribute that is definitely well needed when you're facing the AFC North teams towards the late in December. And just rounding out that linebacking group for a guy that can play next to Preston Brown, who can stay on the field for all 3 downs and can just be a leader for the defense going forward and doing their best to just turn around, because defenses who do have that quick turnaround, they just find a playmaker, some type of catalyst, some type of leader. The Jets did that with Jamal Adams, 2017. He really turned around that defense and made him into a force to be reckoned with, and really asserted himself as a leader in that locker room. I think Bush can do a similar thing, and I think that's something that they value with that, because the thing that they talked about with Price last year is how he commanded the OSU's locker room, how he commanded meeting rooms, and I think Bush has that similar intangible to him, and I think that's ultimately what's going to make them attracted to him the most. And not only does it fit as a need, but just fit as somebody that I think checks all the other boxes besides just what position that he plays and all that other stuff.
I like it. You went a tiny bit more realistic than I did. Mine does have a little bit of an air of a pipe dream to it, but there are reasons why I think this person either could be there at number 11, or maybe the Bengals move up a couple spots to get this player. Before I say that, John, you did not. Did I hear you right? You didn't have a quarterback taken in the first 5 picks, did you?
I did not.
Okay. Neither did I. And the guy I think the Bengals could be looking at, and the reason why I did pick this guy, again, there's a little bit of a pipe dream aspect, but he could slip through the cracks out of the top 10. He could, it could be the Bengals move up to get him a little bit, but I went with Ed Oliver. And there's a reason why. I don't common knowledge tells you he's probably going top 7. Now I keep reading on him. There are some significant concerns on his size. By scouts, they thought he played at about a defensive end type of weight last year, which is, 260s, 270s. There is some immense depth along the defensive line this year, whether that's defensive end or Quinnen Williams and all of these guys. We don't know. There's probably going to be 2 quarterbacks taken before the Bengals pick. Someone may move in and get an offensive lineman. Weird things might happen within the top 10. So he could slip in to the Bengals to 11. Unlikely, but possible. I am doing a write-up on him for CincyJungle.com as, the 11 for 11 series. He was one of the guys that the Bengals could be looking at. So, again, not overly likely that he gets to them at 11. Maybe they need to move up and get him, but it is possible. There are possible scenarios in which he gets there. Still, a lot of criticism, and the criticisms, oddly enough, John, are very similar to what was said about Geno Atkins and Aaron Donald. Mm-hmm. He's too small. He can't do all the things the big tackles can do. He's kind of, for this kid, he didn't play against great competition. But his tape is incredible. I went and saw his highlights and all that kind of stuff. His effort level is incredible. And he's known as a pretty good kid. Taylor was in LA with, kind of 2 defensive tackles that played well with each other, and Sue and Donald that kind of had some similarities in terms of what they can do. So, the downside is if the Bengals were to get him, he wouldn't necessarily come in and be a starter, but he would be a heavy rotator. He would come in and be really a big boost to a team that needs a lot of help on defense. That's why I went round 1 and round 2 on defense, right in the middle of that defense. So he's a guy, again, I think your scenario is a little bit more realistic in terms of, Devin Bush off the board, all that kind of stuff. But there are some scenarios that could deliver Ed Oliver to the Bengals with their pick. And I think you absolutely sprint to the podium if he's there. And like you said, John, he is a kind of a 3 technique guy, and that those are some of the guys that the Bengals are showing interest in mostly right now. So that's who I've got. Am I crazy to think he'll be there?
No, because the NFL just tends to overthink things too much. And yeah, he played 260, 265. I think Aaron Donald played 270 this past season or the season before, and hasn't really stopped him. And it's unfair to compare Oliver to Donald right now, because you have to remember that Donald was a redshirt senior when he left Pittsburgh, and Aaron Donald's only 21 years old. He only has 3 years of collegiate experience to his name. So the technical prowess is not close to Donald right now, and that's okay because Oliver still produced at an all-pro level in terms of market share. He still tested pretty damn similar to Geno Atkins in terms of size adjusted testing. So he has the all-pro traits to him. He has the age upside to him. He's not Aaron Donald, but he has the upside to become eventually Aaron Donald. And I think that's just not crazy to say, but it's also not crazy to say that the NFL and most of the teams that consistently pick in the bottom of the draft order can't get over these silly size stereotypes and have these ridiculous thresholds that just don't mean anything. And it's not crazy to think that the NFL could overthink Ed Oliver, because not too long ago there were some teams believing that he should play linebacker instead of in the 3-point stance on the defensive line. So if he drops out of the top 10, like the only way that the Bengals shouldn't take Ed Oliver is if they want a quarterback and they want like a Dwayne Haskins or Drew Lock. But even still, there's an argument to be made that you just have to take Ed Oliver no matter what.
Do you know when Aaron Donald was picked?
13th, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, granted, that was a few years ago, and maybe some people have learned some things, but I think at that point, Donald was a little bit of a tiny bit cleaner prospect than Oliver. Yeah. So that's where I sit here and I say, look, it may be a touch unrealistic that he falls to 11. Maybe the Bengals scoot up a pick or two or what have you. I think that is a difference-making player, though. His effort level is incredible. He's not an outstanding pass rusher, but he can do some pass rush. He can give you some pass rush, and I think that'll be boosted. That's the other thing that I love about the kid. He didn't really have a lot of surrounding help. He was the guy that offense is keyed on to block, and so that's what I liked about him. And you put him next to Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, and company. It could be a very good thing. So I went to recap. I went Ed Oliver. I went Mac Wilson, I went Riley Ridley, I went Chuma Edoga, and I went Bryce Love. And John, yours?
Dalen Mack, Terry McLaurin, Ja'Kai Polite, Dalton Risner, Devin Bush.
Now I got him on Ed Oliver. Yeah.
Now all I'm thinking about is Ed Oliver.
Yeah. So I think someone had said you won the draft by a hair. So congratulations, John.
Just a hair?
Yeah, just a hair. So congratulations on that. But I think both of our hauls would have been good. I know some people will sit here and say, either unrealistic or what have you. I get it. But we've seen weird things happen on draft day. And the other thing is, a lot of people will say no quarterbacks, in the first 5 rounds. I think Zach Taylor wants to see what he can get out of Andy Dalton. It has a bridge year. And like I said, if it's not in the first round, I think they're waiting. So we do have a call on the line. It's from good friend Terrell here. I don't know if it's a reaction to our draft, but Terrell, how are you?
Hey, how you doing? How you guys doing?
Well, I'm waiting to hear the hate and of how stupid I am on my draft here. So
I actually think both of y'all draft players, either one of them will be great. I really do. Like the lineman from USC, Dal Risner, the wide receiver from Ohio State, Bryce Love. The only thing about Bryce Love is I'd rather have Darnell Henderson from Memphis. That's what I really want.
Yeah, and he's a good player.
And because he like Alvin Kamara to me. But and also I forgot, I don't know his first name, but the small school guy, offensive lineman,
Garrett Bradbury.
I like him too. I think his upside to me is greater than Billy Price's.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I gotta say, the first round, everybody knows we want a linebacker, so they're gonna try to get White. So if we get Bush, hey, I think he's gonna be a Pro Bowler. I think he is.
Yep.
And young too. If I was to say a wild card, like you said, the wild card, I think Oliver. I think it's Haskins.
Yeah.
And before I get out of here, one thing I did want to say to y'all last week is 3 people I think on the hot seat next year. Number 3 is Billy Price. Number 2, John Ross. Number 1, Andy Dalton.
Yep. I can't even disagree with you on that. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And
The last 2 first-round picks.
yeah, that's the two last 2 first-round picks, and then a high second-round pick from years ago. So it's like, oh, wonderful. But you're not wrong about that, Terrell. Thanks for calling in, buddy. Appreciate it, and
no problem. Thank you.
don't be a stranger. So he likes what we did on the mock draft there, John. Well, so I guess we can pat ourselves on the back. I can't really pat you on the back, but I can pat myself on. So that was our 5-round mock draft, John Sheeran's and mine. That's the mock draft this week was courtesy of New Era Caps. Go get their new draft hat. I'm wearing it. It's pretty slick. So go get that, and yeah, go wear it for the draft, and let us know how dumb we are about our picks, our 5 picks, or let us know how smart we are. We take compliments too. So I see just some comments here before we try and get to a couple of questions and then vominos out of here. Millhouse Craig says drafting a QB this year would be stupid, in all caps, in my opinion. So I guess we're on the right track with him or her at least. Optic Blast says I'd give Andy one more chance. He has been a much better quarterback than he gets credit for. Okay. I mean, there's yes and no to that, but let's see. I don't like Greer and Haskins. I don't like Greer and Haskins would fit great in our offense as Roger Moore. Ken Dipple says miracle next year. Bengals select Justin Herbert, quarterback Oregon. Well, that would maybe either require trading or being very awful this year. Greg Morse II says Oliver would be great. Thanks, Greg. Spencer Myers was the one who said John Sheeran wins the draft by a hair. Love the Ed Oliver pick, though, if possible. So, okay, maybe we're not as big of idiots as I thought, John. But it was fun. It was fun. And, I'm curious to see how accurate we are or inaccurate. Probably is going to be more the case because at least me.
Yeah. If you had a guess of because we're probably like a few days away from Lapham spilling the beans.
Yeah.
But there's usually like 5 or 6 guys who you can pretty much write on a piece of paper as like the guys that they're like for sure targeting. If you had to guess right now, who do you think those 5 guys are? Because I have a tentative list in my head right now.
It's a great question. I think it's White. I think it's Bush. I think it's Oliver. I think it's Wilkins, the kid from Clemson, and maybe it's Haskins. Maybe they do have a quarterback in there, but I think those are the 5 they're probably kicking around. We had asked, and I got a text from I think it was Ken Dipple who said, DK Metcalf. Maybe they trade back and DK Metcalf. I mean, like our reasoning for McLaurin and Ridley. It makes sense, but I don't think a first-round pick makes sense there. But it's possible. But I think if you were to ask me, I think it's mostly defense. I think they realize they need some help on that front. That front was deplorable, and then it got even worse as injuries hit. So to me, I think it's mostly defense, maybe a quarterback in there if you're asking 5. Who are yours?
Yeah, I don't because like White on it would make a ton of sense. I think I'm just going to stick with like the guys who are at least have a reasonable chance of being there because I think White is just the top 6 pick, like regardless. I think it's Bush, Rashawn Gary.
Really?
Yeah.
You think 2 Michigan boys, huh?
Yeah. It's not going to please Ohio State fans, but I think if it is a quarterback, it's probably Haskins because that's like the name that's being thrown around a bunch. And then I think Cody Ford is probably on that list too, just based off what interest they've shown there. And then like Oliver's probably with the same like thing as White, where if he's available, he's just becomes like the main option because how can you say no to that? But I think they may not be playing for him to be on the board. So maybe a guy like Juwan Taylor becomes along in that same group with Ford is just like just one of the, if they're going to take a tackle, it's probably going to be Ford or Taylor. And I think it might still be in the cards. So those are like the 4 or 5 that I'm kind of twisting around right now. And Montez Sweat as another edge rusher.
Yeah, I mean, truth be told, I did put 2 of my favorite guys in my mock in Bryce Love and Ed Oliver. I mean, those 2 guys just are they're fun players to watch. And so, I think if someone's going to fall to him, someone good's going to fall to him, whether it is a quarterback, whether it, no offensive linemen are picked, or whether it's whatever the case may be. I mean, someone's going to fall to him at 11, and
it's going to be hard for them to mess it up, but I won't put it past them if they do this.
Yeah. Real quick. I wanted to ask you this. I had a couple of names on my mock that I almost put in, but I wanted to kind of say, hey, these are kind of wild card players that not a lot of people are talking about that they could draft. One guy, I had three names. One is Sheldrick Redwine, the safety out of Miami. And he would be maybe a round 4 type of guy. A lot of athleticism, former corner, but can hit, and he had 3 interceptions last year. So he could be a guy that they use, especially if they're looking to do more 3 safety sets. Maybe Sean Williams a little more in the box, and Bates and Redwine could be kind of out there a little bit. A guy I toyed with putting it round 3 was Andy Isabella. Just a speedy wide receiver. He can actually play a lot. Most of his work will be done in the slot, but he can do some things outside, and he's got speed to be a deep threat a little bit too. So that was a guy that I thought about putting in there. And then at the top of round 2, if the Bengals do want to take a shot on somebody, and it's not really character, I mean it is a little bit, but Dexter Lawrence, and he's the complete opposite of the mold of Ed Oliver, but very disruptive guy, can make a lot of plays, can really help out the Bengals defense. That was a guy I really thought about putting in there, but just couldn't make all the pieces fit and work. But that's a guy to me could be a sneaky guy. Maybe if he slips to the top of round 2, the Bengals make a move there. I
pondered putting Ryan Finley in because he's like the only quarterback that they've had in the building. I couldn't do that to myself. I couldn't have to sit here and try to justify that, because I'm kind of with you. Like, I don't think they're going to force themselves into taking a quarterback for the sake of taking a quarterback if they don't take one in round 1. I think they probably just wait until late in day 3 to just take one, because who knows what attachment they have to Jeff Driscoll. And it's again, they have 3 quarterbacks coaches on the coaching staff, so they're probably going to take one. I just don't think that with how the roster is right now, they're just going to be in a position to force themselves into doing so, because it's just not it's still Duke Tobin, it's still Mike Brown, and it's just not how they kind of operate. So it would be shocking to see them to take one out of this class, because I don't think they've at least been really secretive about what the interest that they've shown there, and so there's just not a lot of ground to go off of to say with any confidence that they're going to take one in the 2nd or 3rd round.
Yep. Your thoughts on we had a 4-round mock from Dan from Tennessee, Devin Bush, Titus Howard,
like him,
from Alabama State, Alize Mack, the tight end from Notre Dame, and Brett Rippon, the quarterback of Boise State. What do you think of that?
I like 3 of those guys. I don't really know that much about Mack, other than the fact that what school he went to.
He's the guy I know the least about, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think he's really tall, though. It might be the Michigan guy, but no, I like Howard. I think the 20 to 40 range, he might be a 1st-round pick, which for Alabama State would be incredible for him. But obviously Bush is good. I think Howard can develop into a long-term starter at either tackle spot, because he actually ended up rotating between right and left tackle during last year, which is impressive enough. But he really should have the Senior Bowl. And Ripen will be interesting. I'm not really sure where he ends up going, because doesn't have the prototypical dimensions of a long-term quarterback. So he might end up dropping into the 5th or 6th round, but he's got a live arm, and that may force a team to take a chance on him in the 3rd or 4th round. But if they do end up going with the day 3 quarterback, Ripen's one of my few favorite guys to end up taking that chance on. So I like him.
Yep. We've mentioned this listener a couple times, but he hit us up before the show. Ken Dipple was asking, and I thought this was interesting. It was a lot about why no fullback? Why are the Bengals not using fullbacks and everything? He mentioned, he really is a fan of Moose Johnson. He mentioned him in a couple of texts that he sent our way. Now, Moose Johnson, that's a throwback, and there's just not a lot of battering ram type of guy, Lorenzo Neals anymore in the NFL. My thoughts initially, John, you're a much smarter guy than I am, and you do more film study and film breakdown than I do. But my thought is the NFL has changed where you spread folks out, and the I formations and stuff that just doesn't. It's not used as frequently, and the Bengals run a lot of zone stuff, and that's not very fullback friendly. But your thoughts on that? And do the Bengals need to start employing a guy like that? Maybe take a little bit of the heat off of Andy Dalton and be a power running team.
Well, there are no traditional fullbacks anymore. There are no more Tony Richardsons or Lorenzo Neals and
right
like that exist anymore. But you look at Kyle Shanahan's offense with the 49ers, he uses a player in that position on most of the snaps. Like we look at like the Rams traditional offense and how they go 11 personnel and 3 receivers and 1 running back with the 49ers and with the Falcons back in 2016 when they were really explosive. They ran a lot of 2 receiver sets and really condensed everything. And that's almost like when we talk about teams spreading defenses out, there's always been like a counter movement of teams condensing into the box and getting receivers into multi-directional releases where they can go outside or inside, but also having 2 running backs and a fullback in there. The only thing is that fullback has to be versatile. He can't just be a blocker. He has to be able to run routes. He has to be able to catch the ball. That's why Kyle Juszczyk ended up getting like a $20 million contract with the 49ers and thinking he's a fullback. Why are you paying him that much? Well, because he does more than just block. He ends up running the ball. He ends up going out for a lot of routes. And if the Bengals want to employ a fullback and have him utilize a lot more, they need to use him more than how they use Ryan Hugh, which was just a battering ram downhill. He needs to be athletic. He needs to be able to get out to the flat and be able to run after the catch, because you can succeed in the NFL when condensing everything like that, but you have to be creative with it, and you can't pretend like it's 2006 anymore. So traditional fullbacks, no, but multi-dimensional fullbacks, you can find a way to be successful with that.
Yeah, and H-back, right?
Yeah, it takes the right offensive mind to do it, and we'll see if that's what Zach Taylor wants. But I don't think we can say with confidence that that's it right now.
Yeah, and who knows if the Bengals take another tight end in this year's draft, which is possible. They then can maybe get a little creative and flexible with CJ Uzomah and Tyler Eifert and maybe a new guy, and they move things around. So they used, I think the Rams used Tyler Higbee a couple times in the backfield. Yeah. Used him as a little outlet guy. So it's possible, but I agree with you. I think it's more of the Ryan Hewitt tight endish, H-backish type of mold, not the thumper old school walking square at fullback. So, hey, but thanks for all the questions, guys. It's been a long show, and we're going to get out of here, but it's been a jam-packed show. We've had a lot to talk about between the schedule release, our mock draft, and then the Bengals, of course, are on the clock next week. But yeah, and then, they've got a ton of picks, especially in day 3. So my guess is they'll probably maneuver. I don't think you're going to use 5th, 6th round picks, but who knows? I don't know. Any final thoughts, John, before we get out of here?
I'm going to bed. I'm on like 2 hours sleep, and I'm recovering from the flu. So I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we got these takes off, so I can just die for the next couple days.
Well, hopefully don't literally die, but I apologize. I didn't know you had such little sleep. So I know you're not.
We do it for the content.
I know you weren't feeling 100%, but I appreciate it. I suppose this could have waited until next week, but my thinking is we'll probably have a very abbreviated show next Wednesday. And then, John, if you're able to join, we do the reactions to the picks and all that kind of stuff. So just a side note, I haven't figured out the logistics of it yet, but some of those reactions, we may do the reactions on Cincy Jungle's Facebook Live first, and then feed them to the YouTube channel and our audio channels. I haven't figured out the logistics on how I want to do that yet, because we're going to need to maybe kill 2 birds with one stone or what have you. So we'll figure that out. But either way, the content's going to get to you. We'll probably have an abbreviated episode next week, maybe just some listener questions or something like that, and then move into draft coverage from there. But the NFL draft is right around the corner, and we're excited. Hopefully the Bengals make some significant moves to improve their team and make make a playoff push. For John Sheeran, I hope you feel better, buddy. For John Sheeran, I'm Anthony Cosenza. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all your feedback, your questions, and everything. Get this show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on Google Play. You can get it on Megaphone, cincyjungle.com, and on YouTube. We'll see you next time.